So let's bring in here another straight talker, Alan Oster, the Chief Economist of the National Australia Bank, who, like others, adjusted up his forecast for economic growth ahead of those GDP numbers out today. Alan, just tell me first up, is the Treasurer right to warn about what lies ahead for our economy?
I think the economy is fine, but over the course of next year, I think the economy will slow. So the GDP numbers were a good set of numbers. They had some parts of it that weren't so good. In other words, most of the growth came out of stocks. In other words, people were trying to get supply in, and that showed up as a very big increase in stocks. That's temporary. The consumption was okay. Business investment was pretty flat, and the exports took out a lot. So you'd basically say the economy is still going to grow pretty well next year, but to some extent that stock cycle has brought forward some growth. We still see the economy growing 3 to 3.5% during the course of the rest of the year, which means you average around 4%. But, you've got a slower global growth, you've got an increase in rates, and so we think the growth momentum by next year might be something closer to 2%.
And given that so much of the economy relies on the resilience of the household sector, and indeed even tax receipts from the government, they rely on people maintaining their jobs. Just what did it say about the resilience of that household and the consumer?
Well, it says the consumer's doing well. All our internal data, and we've got data up until about a week ago, saying hospitality has roared back after a really weak January because of Omicron. And so when we look at the very short term in the June quarter, we know that consumption is going to be stronger than it was in this quarter, but you're not going to have the stocks help either. But, something like 1% growth in the next quarter is probably reasonable. And as I said, something like 3.5% or 4% growth this year. So I don't think any chance of a recession this year, but next year we're going to be facing a lot more difficulties in terms of slower global growth, higher rates, and so that will slow the momentum.
I was thinking also about the rising inflation and whether that tips the consumer over the edge at some stage. Higher interest rates likely to do the same thing. Just when that squeeze starts to be felt on consumption, because quite clearly that's an issue. And then the second one is going to be the business profits. As soon as they get squeezed by inflation, that's when business might start making decisions about whether they employ or whether they let workers go. Well,
normally monetary policy takes 12 to 18 months to come. So I would have thought the consumer would start to really feel it around the end of the year, or maybe early next year. And so that's when you start to slow down a bit. The business profit one, you have to be a bit careful about, because a lot of that was the mining stocks or mining in higher commodity prices. And so normally when business gets a big increase in their profits, they spend a lot more on investment, but I don't think the miners are going to be spending a lot more. I think rather they're just going to take the profits temporarily. And so business investment, yes, we think it's improving. Yes, we think it'll be strong. But at this stage, we're just seeing signs that the economy's okay, but you just need to be a little bit careful. In the national accounts, there was a lot of signs of big increases in prices. So domestic demand inflated was the highest for 10 years, but we didn't really see a lot of wage pressure.
Yes.
And so that's another issue that you've got to watch. But with low levels of unemployment, we think it'll get down to about 3.5 soon.
Yes.
That means wages will pick up.
And just very quickly, what does it say for what the Reserve Bank has to face in terms of its decision-making, not just next week, but also in the coming months?
Look, I think they've got a whole run of rate rises coming. Whether they're 25 or 50, it's hard to say. It depends on the data. We think maybe next week, June, so 25, July 25, August 25, and then maybe you do another one towards the end of the year. So you probably got rates about 1 to 1.5%, or about 1.5% higher than where they are now by the end of the year. And that will start to have an impact on households' balance sheets, also how scared they are, because that's the psychological one that makes them difficult, particularly at a time when house prices are falling.